Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is so exciting for me because, in a post-COVID world, to have a hybrid that's real, that is on Zoom for several weeks and then in person, that's what we have going on here. And so I'm really excited to have us do our last online session. There'll be no lunch and learn next Tuesday, because this Sunday at 10 a.m. At Temple Bethel will be Ted Merwin in person about Jews and deli, with a fabulous deli spread. Aileen and Julie will be running that. So we're really excited to have Ted Merwin, who's an expert on Jewish culture, with us for the third week. If you haven't registered already, I'm going to put the link in the chat, and just, if not, you can go to the TBE website. There's still room. You can still register. It's in person on Sunday morning, 10 a.m. So again, a reminder, there's no class. Thanks to Aileen for being our producer, and Ted, I'll hand things over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And, I'm a little sad this is our last session on Zoom, because I really enjoyed meeting all of you and getting to talk to you about, some of my favorite subjects. So today we're going to talk about Jews and shelter. And before we start, I just wanted to ask if folks could unmute themselves or just put in the chat and just tell us where all the places they've lived in their life.
Well,
you don't have to list everyone, but, tell us where you were born and tell us, basically the places that you've lived, if you don't mind.
can you see me?
I'm going to put the question in the chat. Where?
In the
What
chat.
are all the places where you've lived? What are all the places where you...
You want us to do it out loud or just in chat?
Do it out loud if you want. I mean, whatever's easy.
Okay. New York, Georgia, Illinois, Florida.
Wow. Okay. Anybody have more than that?
More? No.
Anybody have other ones, different ones?
New York, New Jersey, Florida.
New York, New Jersey, Florida. Okay. Any others?
I was born in Boston. I lived in Massachusetts, many locations, and then Florida.
Okay. And the rabbi put London, Jerusalem. Wow. New York, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and obviously Florida. So wow, that's pretty impressive. All right. So just as a way of getting us to start thinking about, where Jews have lived in the time that they've lived in America. And I guess you could say that for most of Jewish history, Jews were homeless, not in the sense that they didn't necessarily have a dwelling to live in, but they didn't have a land to call their own, right? Until 1948, Jews basically were, they were living in places, but they were living in places without living of those places, I guess you could say. So I want to take a similar approach that we've taken the last 2 weeks. And I want to start with the Jewish immigrant experience on the Lower East Side, and just think through with you, what the progression has been, what the pattern has been in terms of Jewish migration within the United States. I mean, we're focusing on New York for the most part, because as you all know, I'm very New York centric in my thinking. But what would you say? I mean, what would be your, what's your understanding of what the pattern was in terms of Jews arriving in New York, settling on the Lower East Side, living in the tenements, which we talked a little bit about last week with the sweatshops and all that kind of thing. And then where after that? Where did they go for the most part after that? Judy?
Well, I'm not from New York, and I hope you're not a Yankees fan. That's all I'll say.
I
I'm a
was a
Bostonian.
Yankees fan for a long time. I was a Yankees fan for a long time. But even in Washington, Chicago, I mean, other places, Miami Beach. I don't know. I mean, where did Jews, Anita, go ahead.
My family came and they settled on the Lower East Side like everybody else. One branch of the family moved to New Jersey to become farmers.
Really?
And the remainder of them settling in Brooklyn, and my paternal side of my family, they were more from the Pale and Russian speaking, so they ended up in Ireland.
Where?
So they were the first. They probably were the first wave of Jews in Coney Island, where now it's a Jewish Russian compound again.
Yes. No, it's very
So
much
that
it.
was, and then
Uh-huh.
after my parents married, we lived in Brooklyn. We
Okay.
lived in East New York, and then
Mhm.
we moved to what my grandmother said was the ends of the earth. We moved to Queens. And subsequently, we moved, my parents lived in Queens until they shared Queens in Florida.
Mhm.
And then my husband and I were married. We lived in Queens, and then we moved to Long Island, and then we moved again and again and again on Long Island, and then to Florida.
Stephen, you were
So
nodding.
I think that pretty much is very typical of New York Jews,
Stephen, is
starting
that-
at the Lower East Side and
Yeah, no,
moving
absolutely.
in that pattern.
Stephen, is that your experience too?
Very similar, but her comment that when my aunt moved from Brooklyn to Queens, we
Yeah.
thought we'd never see her again.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, without further ado, let's look at, this whole series is on specifically comedy as a theme or I guess I would say in this case, shelter as a theme in Jewish comedy, just like we did food as a theme in Jewish comedy and clothing as a theme in Jewish comedy. So let's start again with that Lower East Side experience, and hopefully we'll have some things that will amuse you and that you'll have some interesting ideas about. Okay, so we're going to play this from the start. And I have to make sure my music is playing also. Okay. Hear that?
Hi, I'm Kira Garcia.
Yes.
I work
We're
here
good.
at the Lower East Side Tenement Museum.
Has anyone been to the Tenement Museum? Did I ask you this last week? I can't remember. It's such a wonderful museum. If you ever get a chance, if you're in New York, it is a great, great museum.
New York City. We're going to be taking a look at our historic tenement building, which was built in 1863. About 7,000 immigrants lived here between the years of 1863 and 1935. Some of what you see around you is original to the building's construction in 1863, and this handrail that I'm holding onto right now is one of those things. So every resident of this building, all 7,000 of them, use this same handrail. So here we are in what was once the home of the Confino family. The Confinos were a Jewish family from a part of the world which is now Greece. They lived here in this apartment, which is 3 rooms, about 325 square feet, as all of our tenement apartments are, with 10 family members. So 2 adults and 8 children of varying ages. So in the early 20th century, when the Confino family lived here, they would have enjoyed a few amenities which were relatively new, including gas light and running water. These amenities presented a tremendous improvement on the way earlier residents had lived. So when this building was originally built, there's no running water, there's no source of interior light, whether gas or electricity, and there's really not much in the way of housing regulation in those days. Flash forward a little bit to the early 20th century, and the Tenement House Act has changed that. So these lovely new amenities that the Confino family would have enjoyed did not come about magically overnight. This is a long-fought battle that goes all the way to the Supreme Court before tenement residents can enjoy interior light and running water and flushing toilets in the hall as well. The tenement.
Okay, I'm going to move on from there. I just wanted to give a little bit of a taste of the context before we start talking about looking at some comedic examples. But oh wait, I'm not ready for that yet. So I wanted to say one of the things that was characteristic of the Lower East Side tenements, which were extremely overcrowded, as we've already said, they were overcrowded, not just overcrowded, but they were very unsafe. And one of the reasons they were unsafe is because a lot of the factory workers who were sewing clothing would bring their work home in order to be able to make more money. So they'd stay up all night, doing what was called piecework. And so they had all kinds of machinery around and maybe chemicals or whatever, depending on if they were dyeing the fabrics or whatever. And it was not a great place for little kids to be running around, and there were lots of accidents and things like that. The other thing that made it very overcrowded, besides the fact that a lot of them had, large families and all that, is that in order to really make ends meet, they would often have to rent out rooms to single men who didn't have any other place to live. And there are lots and lots of jokes and stories about the boarder, trying to seduce the landlady or whatever, which probably happened from time to time. And there are even stories of, that they don't have a bed. So they would take the door off of its hinges at night and put it on the floor in the middle of everything. And that's where the boarder would sleep. So it was a very chaotic, crazy situation. And so does anyone know who Five-ish Finkel is? You've probably seen him. Yeah, right. He's he died a few years ago, unfortunately, but he was on TV, and he was one of those old style, sort of vaudeville comedians who used a lot of Yiddish in his routines. So he sings this in both Yiddish and English. So don't worry if you don't know the Yiddish. Okay.
My wife and I just parted. I'm back where I started, like a bachelor when I was a kid. But when I started moving, my wife said disapproving, stay right here, it's better, so I did. Why go and look for shelter, confused and helter-skelter, just to be alone and save a cent? Do a favor, stay right here. It'll work out, have no fear. Like a stranger, I pay her my rent. Oh, I am a boarder by my wife. What an improvement in my life. No more problems, never harried. I am happily unmarried. I am a boarder by my wife. Hey! Now a little Mamelution. Ich bin schon wieder Single, pinkt also wie ein Engel, mit mein Weibel aber sich gegett. Gedenkt hab ich zum Muffen, Gesicht zum Schluffen, hat mein Weibel mich übergerät. Us darf für sich in Glicken, in Fremder sich stecken, in sein alleine Reden zu der Welt. Bleib du immer pink wie früher, sei ja oder jetzt bei mir, wie ein Fremder zu in dem Reden. Weil ich bin a Border bei mein Weib. Männer, ist das ein teurer Job. Sie attendet mich mit alles, wenn ich gefragt, sie kennt schon alles. Ich bin a Border bei mein Weib. Oh yeah, hey!
Okay, so I love this song. I mean, I love that it's such a catchy tune. It may be in your head the rest of the day. I'm sorry if it won't leave you for a while. But it's such an interesting idea, right? Like, so he and his wife basically split up, but he can't afford to live anywhere else. So why not just be the boarder in his own house? Which isn't his house anymore. But what kind of a crazy marriage do they have? I mean, it's so funny. It's almost like, is there something that's sort of, titillating about being the boarder, based on what I was saying earlier, or, what exactly is going on here? And the fact that he's singing it in a tuxedo or whatever, a suit and a bow tie and everything is also strange, because it's, and it gets to what we were talking about, I think the other day in terms of nostalgia, like, to have nostalgia for the past from a place of privilege, from a place of affluence, from a place of being to look back on something that actually sounds like it was very complicated and messy and, whatever, but to just be able to have a sense of humor about it because it's so far, presumably, in the past but I don't know. I'm curious what you think about this. What ideas does it give you? Or questions?
Well, my paternal grandparents had a boarder. It was a woman though.
Okay.
And she was like a member of their family. She cooked, she had access to the stove and all that stuff. But I'll tell you, all your New York memories are very different in Boston. As the Jews came over, they did settle in areas with other Jews, but not anything like what the tenements were. And then they moved on into in buying a house, and then their children, of course, moved further away from their origins.
Right. So they moved to like Dorchester and Manalapan, those areas.
From Dorchester, right?
Okay, you're from Dorchester, right? And then they moved more into the suburb, further into Newton and into
exactly.
Native,
that took money, but they did it.
Right. All right. Good. All right. So, but I guess it's interesting if you think about it nowadays with Airbnb. Right. I mean, this is how a lot of people right? When they travel, they're basically, it's not exactly a border, but it's like the 21st century version of being a border. And we take it for granted that, like, of course we can stay in other people's houses and it's no problem. And we save a lot of money that way or whatever. And we get to see the world. But in those days, it was not something to be proud of, that you couldn't afford your own place to live. And so there was something very precarious about it, I would say. And so it's just something to keep in mind, as, what were Jews sort of moving away from? They were moving away from the shtetl and from the old country and from the poverty and all that in Poland and those countries. But then after the immigrant period, they were also moving away from that immigrant period in the same way as they did, as we talked about, with food and with clothing, where they were eating differently, dressing differently, and so on, to sort of distinguish themselves from what they had been in the past. Okay, so I wanted to play a short clip from The Jazz Singer, which I'm sure everyone is very familiar with. Obviously, it was the first talking film from 1927. I'm not going to play one of the blackface scenes or whatever, because I feel like it's very, very painful to watch that nowadays. But after he becomes successful, or he's in the process of becoming more successful, he comes back to his mother's apartment on the Lower East Side, and he tells her about, what he's going to do now that he's going to have some money. Okay, so I'm going to skip to that part of it, which is right around 1 minute.
Oh, you like that, Mama? Yes. I'm glad of it. I'd rather please you than anybody I know of. Oh, darling, will you give me something? What? You'll never guess. Shut your eyes, Mama. Shut them for little Jackie. Oh, I'm going to steal something. I'll give it back to you someday, too. You see if I don't. Mama, darling, if I'm a success in this show, well, we're going to move from here. Oh, yes, we're going to move up in the Bronx. A lot of nice green grass up there, and a whole lot of people you know. There's the Ginsbergs, the Guttenbergs, and the Goldbergs. Oh, a whole lot of birds. I don't know them all. And I'm going to buy you a nice black silk dress, Mama.
All right. So what's he going to do if he's a big success? They're going to move up to the Bronx. Why? And I think we might have mentioned this last time. From the Lower East Side, that's basically where people went. They went to the Bronx, they went to Brooklyn, they went to East Harlem and Upper Manhattan. Actually, they had already started moving there. For example,
you see, Mrs. Friedman, the butcher's wife, she'll be jealous of you.
Sorry. Wife will be jealous of you. All right. How do I get back to? All right. This is my next one. Okay. So does anyone know who this is? Anybody recognize this person?
Molly Goldberg.
Yeah. Molly Goldberg. And where did Molly? Did you just hear what he was saying about who's going to be up in the Bronx when they move up to the Bronx? Who are the people who are going to be there? The Greenbergs and the Goldbergs. He says the Goldbergs.
Oh, right.
And all the Bergs there. And this is right. Molly Goldberg, right? She was actually born in East Harlem in 1899. So Jews had already moved up there. But her show was about the Bronx, and she was incredible, right? I mean, she wrote close to 5,000 radio scripts in the 1920s about this Jewish family living in the tenements in the Bronx. And then it became a TV show in the late 40s. And they in the show they moved to Connecticut from the Bronx. And then unfortunately, one of her co-stars, who played her husband, an actor by the name of Philip Loeb, was accused by the House Un-American Activities Committee of being a communist, and they basically forced the show to cut him. And he actually he got a pretty nice severance or whatever, but he actually ended up committing suicide a few years later. So it was very tragic. The show was canceled for a while, then it came back. And I don't think there's any connection with the new show, The Goldbergs, right? Which was about a Jewish family living outside Philadelphia in the 1980s. If you've seen that one, the more recent show, The Goldbergs. I don't think there's any connection between them. But Molly Goldberg was, really an incredible person, a really path-breaking female, writer, actor, and so on. So let me just producer.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah.
Make a comment.
Go ahead.
What was interesting, Molly Goldberg was actually a very, probably lived on Park Avenue, and very affluent woman, and, was nothing like her character. Edward R. Murrow did when he used to do interviewing people, one of her interviews was her, and it was incredible. And of course, she showed who she really was. But I wanted to speak to your comment about how they could sing about these horrible circumstances they lived in and smile about it. And my opinion is because, I mean, we're all nostalgic. It doesn't matter how bad it was. You think about it, it's about the people you knew and loved and the things you did, and you're nostalgic about your childhood or those types of things. So I don't think it matters that it wasn't good because, I mean, it belonged to you. It's your past.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I think the question a lot of people ask, though, is, sort of what was lost along the way as Jews became more affluent. Was there any sense in which our values, changed so that we left behind a lot of the Jewish values that might have characterized the times when we were, less fortunate? And that does seem to happen as in individual lives, as people get more successful, that, they tend to, embrace if they're Jewish, they tend to embrace the more capitalistic world rather than, and sort of lose touch in some ways with their roots. So that's really the question. What does it mean to keep in touch with your roots, to be nostalgic for it? How much is it still a part of you? I think is really an interesting question. All right, so but I'm glad that you said that.
From the Peabody Award-winning director of The Life and Times of Hank Greenberg comes...
Hello. I don't know. Hello is such a little word for such a big...
Oh, what happened?
No.
Hello. I don't know. Hello is such a little word for such a big feeling. I want to say hello to you with all the letters in the alphabet. That would be a hello. Anyway, hello.
Before Martha, before Oprah, there was Gertrude Berg, creator and star of The Goldbergs.
Gertrude Berg invented the sitcom and wrote it.
Don't forget, David, darling, marriage is just not an express train where you get on the first station and you get off the last station. Don't forget, David, darling, there are local stops in between.
Gertrude Berg is the most famous woman in America you never heard of.
She was no shrinking violet.
The press dubbed Gertrude Berg the first lady of radio.
Well, now, you're one of the few people I have ever known who both write and act. Which do you prefer?
Act. When you live with a character, as long as I've lived with Molly, it gets a little confusing. I'm really Molly more hours through the day than I am Gertrude Berg.
When Molly started selling things, it was pioneering in every way.
With a little boiling water and no coffee pots to wash. 1, 2, 3, you have a delicious cup of Sanko coffee.
You remembered it, and you shopped.
Gertrude Berg was the first Best Actress Emmy winner and a Tony Award winner.
Everybody loved Molly Goldberg. Didn't matter if you were a Catholic nun or a Jewish person.
Leave the matzah crumpets. Also the matzah scones.
You didn't think about religion or even ethnicity. Listening to Molly Goldberg, you thought about families.
Okay, so I think what's interesting here is how much it emphasizes how you didn't have to be Jewish, right, to enjoy this. That this was like the beginning of the mainstreaming of Jewish culture in a lot of ways. This song about Ich bin a Border, like that was for Jewish audience, right? It was originally sung in Yiddish. It wasn't something that anyone who wasn't Jewish really had any access to. And so much of the Lower East Side culture really stayed on the Lower East Side in a lot of ways. And now Jews are moving into, neighborhoods that are right, maybe across the East River, and, or uptown, and suddenly, they're starting to be of interest to the rest of society. And we talked about this in terms of food and in terms of clothing, how that second generation, which I told you was my grandparents' generation, was so instrumental in many ways in terms of, I think kind of having a foot in both worlds. We were just talking about the role of nostalgia and the idea that, not that they could really, not that they really had that much of a choice, I don't think. I mean, there was still so much anti-Semitism that it wasn't as if Jews could just basically, it wasn't as if the sky was the limit, because it wasn't. But the reason I'm fascinated by that generation is because it was so deeply rooted still in Jewish life. And also it was the beginning of sort of English language Jewish culture and of this move into popularity among all Americans. Both, I mean, not that it wasn't very popular among Jews. I mean, this show was incredibly popular among Jews, but it clearly wasn't popular only among Jews. And so there's an interesting question there about what happens when Jewish culture is no longer available and consumed, only by Jews. All right, so let's move on a little bit. Jackie Mason is one of my all-time favorite comedians. I actually did meet him once in, I guess was his apartment. I don't know. It was a very small apartment. So I'm thinking maybe it wasn't his apartment, because I know he lived in a very, very big, fancy apartment. But when I was once writing an article about him, I did get to meet him briefly. So I'm going to have to jump forward a little bit on this. Okay, it's going to be small in the corner, but you can see the picture of him outside. I don't know if this is where he lived or an office building. I'm not exactly sure, but okay.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It certainly is a great thrill and a pleasure for you to see me again. I hope you don't mind if I don't talk too long. I have very little time. I live in a luxury building now. I pay $300 a month rent since I became such a hit. And when I leave the house, I get sick. When I paid $40 a month, I walked around. It didn't bother me. But for this price, I can't stay out of the house. How do you think I feel being here when I'm paying a fortune to be there? Don't make no sense. Know what I'm talking about? When I paid $40 a month, I had 7 rooms. Now I pay $300 a month for a room and a half. But you know what I got? I got music in the elevator. I told the guy, I need music in the elevator. I'll make a deal with you. I won't listen. How much do you want? Besides, I live on the first floor. How much music can I hear by the time I get there? There's a guy on the top floor, let him pay for it. I have to run a concert for a guy I don't even know. I want to get my money's worth. So you know what I do? Every night I come home 2 hours early, I go up and down and I listen. I used to take a girl to a nightclub, cost me a fortune. No more, I take her to the elevator. Another thing I got I never knew I needed is a 24-hour doorman. You need a doorman for 24 hours? Makes sense to you? I open the door tops twice a day. Takes a minute and a half.
All right. Oh, sorry. All right. So, what's funny about this, I think, is that he's talking about living in this luxury apartment, but it's all about his being cheap, right? He doesn't want to spend money on taking a girl out. He doesn't want to spend money on the music. He doesn't want to spend money on the doorman. He doesn't want to spend money on anything that he's not, feel like he's getting his money's worth for. So it's like, yes, okay, so the Jews moved from the Bronx, maybe to, if they were really wealthy, they moved to the Upper West Side. That's certainly where the garment manufacturers lived. Eventually the Upper East Side, right? And but still it's the mentality, right? It's like what's his name, who played the violin, who was always so cheap, making jokes about
Jack Benny.
Jack Benny, thank you, I just blanked on it. Jack Benny, right? That kind of thing. And so that's another aspect of this, right? What happens as Jewish comedy does become more mainstream, is it's still replicating a lot of those stereotypes, right? This is what we saw with Fanny Brice in a way. It's what we saw with Eddie Cantor last week. And a lot of people, when I do these talks, they object, they're like, these are not positive, stereotypes about Jews. It's all about how cheap Jews are, how conniving they are, how, they only care about money, whatever kind of thing. And so I think you sort of see this in here. I'm not sure that everyone necessarily loves this type of clip because of the fact that it does, sort of go in that direction. Any comments about that? Do you find it funny, or do you find it actually a little bit, disturbing, or both?
I always found him funny.
Okay, good. I mean, he could actually be very offensive when he wanted to be, racist and whatever when he wanted to be. I don't like that side of him at all. But I find his routines like this, particularly the ones that just keep building and building, and like go deeper and deeper and deeper, I find to be really, really, really funny.
I want to make a comment from somebody who grew up in the South, and there were very few Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an embarrassment sometime. I mean, an insecurity, because those of you who are from large cities, New Yorkers, and all of that, but it was you were almost worried that, you were stereotyped, or that people would think that you were that type of person, that the acts and everything. So there was an attitude like that from many of even I as a young girl. It was embarrassing.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like it's important to be sensitive to that and to not see, just sort of as an unalloyed good, the fact that Jews were becoming more popular. There was also a cost to that. I mean, I guess they realized on some level, or they believed on some level, that they could only really be funny to a mainstream audience if they perpetuated the kinds of stereotypes that in the way that people had seen them to begin with. All right. This one is a little bit less stereotypical. I think you'll enjoy it. If you remember Old Jews Telling Jokes, did anyone see that show or see the clips? It's very funny. This is a version of that, Jewish folks telling jokes. I think it's from Toronto. I think the Federation did this or the JCC did this as a fundraiser or something like that, and just let ordinary people come and tell jokes, which I think is a great idea. And Rabbi Jessica, you might want to think about this at Bethel.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So I need to move forward in this one just a little bit as well.
One thing you should understand is I have a new roommate. Her name is Kathy. Now, it's not what you think. We're just roommates. So Mr. Schwartz comes, brings a lovely bottle of wine. They have a very nice dinner, and she's wondering what's going on between these people. The evening goes well. She goes home, and after she goes, Kathy says to David, that wine was very nice that your mother brought, but I can't find the corkscrew. Well, I don't think my mother took the corkscrew. Well, look, I'm not saying she did, I'm not saying she didn't. So David sends his mother an email, Dear Ma, now, dinner was lovely, the wine was great. Now, I'm not saying you took the corkscrew, but I'm not saying you didn't take the corkscrew, but we can't find it. Can you please get back to me? Mr. Schwartz writes back, Dear David, it was a lovely dinner. It was very nice to meet your roommate. Now, I'm not saying you're sleeping with your roommate. I'm not saying you're not. But if she was sleeping in her own bed, she would have found the corkscrew.
My wife is listening to is on Zoom. Andrea, next time we have Shabbat dinner, I'm going to tell this joke. Just be warned. I think this is a great right before Shabbat dinner. When you open the wine and you're getting ready for the kiddush and everything like that. I think it's a good joke. All right, so I want to keep moving because we don't. I want to. Okay. All right. So Jews are moving. I want to get to Jews moving to the suburbs. I definitely want to get to that. Before I get to that, I just want to say, in addition to moving to the outer boroughs, and
we went to the Catskills in the summer.
Moving up in the air, what was the Jeffersons? Moving on up. Moving up to, was it Park Avenue? They went to the Catskills in the summer. They went to Miami Beach in the winter, and they went to the Catskills.
It's like a scene from Mrs. Marvel.
This is a scene from the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, right? Where
Mrs. Maisel, whatever.
When they go up, this is wonderful. It's one of the highlights of the series. I hope it is for you too, if you've all seen. It's such a wonderful show. Talk about nostalgia. I mean, this is the best. Let me just see if I can get this to play. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna have to cut and paste it. Oh God. That used to work when I was doing practicing, but it never works when you're doing it in person. It only works when you're practicing it. I'm gonna have to hold on. I'm gonna have to just look it up again. Fix that.
Relationship should be private, don't you think?
Amen.
So are you dating?
What?
Come on, dance. Your band takes off, dance away. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day.
That's not a deterrent for nuclear war. I don't know what is.
Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. Chase your cares away.
We're going to the Catskills.
Hallelujah, get happy. For the judgment day.
What group of total and complete assholes needs a skating rink in the middle of summer?
Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready for the judgment day.
Tits up. Tits up.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, I got the link right. Oh, wait, hold on. All right, let's go back to this. So it shows on current slide. Okay, all right. And does anyone remember Myron Cohen?
Of course.
Myron Cohen? Okay, he's almost forgotten nowadays. My kids would never in a million years have even heard of him. But because I played about the cats, I feel like I had to play something about Miami Beach as well. So this is
within reason.
45. Here we go.
And for purposes of this next story, permit me a wee bit of poetic license. This is probably not true. I say that actuaries associated with insurance companies have discovered that people live much longer lives on the Lower East Side of New York than they do anywhere else in the nation. And they sent a group of men down there to talk to them. They had a little fellow, 94 years of age, plied him with many, many questions, finally concluded by saying, since you lived here all of these years, in your opinion, sir, and we value it highly, what would you say the death rate is in this area? Well, he said, gentlemen, in mine opinion, and I value that you value it highly, I would say that the death rate is 1 to a person. And nothing is funnier than the truth. And I swear to you, this is true because it happened right here in Miami Beach last winter while I was at the Deauville. A gentleman I would judge to be somewhere in his 50s told me a true story about his father, who unfortunately is a widower. Now, the son is in good shape financially, and he provides his dad with a lovely 2-room suite at the Deauville, and he visits with him almost every night. And this one evening, the son opened the door to the suite. Here sat his father watching television. He says, "What are you watching, Pop?" He says, "Basketball." He says, "What's the score?" He says, 86 to 82. He says, "Who's winning?" He says, 86. You know.
All right. So Jews moved from the Lower East Side to the outer boroughs, to Upper Manhattan. Then they moved to maybe to luxury apartments if they were really successful. And they went to vacation in the Catskills, and they went to vacation in Miami Beach, and then they moved to the suburbs. And so this is maybe my favorite joke about the suburbs. All right.
You don't have to be Jewish. A call from Long Island.
Hello?
Hello, Mama.
Hello, darling. How are you?
Terrible, Mama. Terrible.
What is it, sweetheart? Tell Mama.
Oh, Mama.
What?
Mama. We're snowed in here.
Oh.
The car wouldn't start this morning. I think both kids have the measles.
Oh.
The doctor can't come until 5 o'clock. I'm coming down with a cold. The freezer is broken and all the food is spoiled. And the house is a mess. And on top of that, Mama, 20 ladies from my Hadassah chapter are coming for lunch at 1 o'clock. Mama, what am I gonna do?
Don't worry, sweetheart. Mother is here. First of all, I'll go to the supermarket and I'll pick up to eat. Then I'll take the subway to the Long Island Railroad, and I'll take the train.
Oh, Mama, I don't
Please,
want
darling, it's only an hour and a half to the bus. And then I'll take the bus, and from where the bus stops, I'll walk the 14 blocks to your house. And for you, darling, I'll put the children to bed, and for you, I'll change the sheets, and I'll give them an aspirin so they shouldn't yell, and I'll clean up the house, and I'll cook something nice for the 20 ladies. They'll love it. Just don't worry, darling. Everything will be okay. Isn't that what a mother is for?
Oh, Mama, thank you. I feel so much better.
By the way, sweetheart, if it's snowing and the car wouldn't start this morning, how did Sam get to work?
Sam? What Sam?
Sam, your husband!
My husband's name is Paul. Is this Tremont 71166?
No, this is Tremont 71177.
Does that mean you're not coming?
But this just shows, right, how far away, I mean, the mother's up in the Bronx, right? Tremont is a part of the Bronx. And she's moved all the way out to Long Island. And their lives are much more separate now than they ever were, right? And she doesn't get to see her grandchildren as much. And she's not as much part of her daughter's life, but she's still the Jewish mother, and she'll be there, whenever her daughter needs her, except that it's not actually her daughter. So I think it's just so emblematic of this shift in generations, in terms of living in different places and what the different life is like, when you're out in the suburbs and you have to worry about snowstorms and cars and getting to work and all that kind of thing. All right. Did anyone have any comment about that?
Keep them coming. It's a riot.
Okay. Good. Okay, so I actually just discovered this morning. I want to talk for a minute about Seinfeld, because how do you talk about, right? I mean, actually what happens is, what's interesting is that after Jews move to the suburbs, in many cases, their children move back to the city. That becomes the pattern. Because, of course, like kids don't want to live in the suburbs. They're not going to meet anyone. They're not going to have much of a social life, right? Their high school friends are all gone. They're college, you know what I mean? They want to be in the city. So there's this reverse migration. I have a friend who lives here in Baltimore who taught for many years as a sociologist in Toronto. And this is what he studies, actually, is sort of like the re-migration to the cities. I think you could see Seinfeld in the 90s, as kind of an example of that in a way. Young people who are now, young Jewish people in particular, but young people who are now back in the city. What I just found out this morning, I want to play an episode called The Apartment, but someone actually somehow figured out that there's no way that that Seinfeld's apartment could have been configured the way it was, because the hallway would have run right into the kitchen. You see how it's like being this diagonal line right through the refrigerator? I don't know how we figured that out, but it was like all this like analysis of different shots of different angles and everything like that. So I thought that was really funny. Of course, it's Hollywood; like they wouldn't need it to work out, but that someone even think about that, is really kind of amazing to me. All right, let's play a little bit of this. I won't play the whole thing, but I'll play a little bit.
I didn't know there was a fireplace.
Look at this. There's a garden.
A garden? I can't believe there's a garden.
Would I have to get a gardener?
Yeah, you can get a gardener.
You tip him?
You can.
You don't tip a gardener.
You can tip a gardener.
You don't need a gardener.
Jerry, you can barbecue back here.
I deliver the coal?
Sure, it's only the same guy who delivers the wood.
Oh, then I gotta tip him.
Oh, man, this place is incredible. Look at all this great light.
I don't have any plants.
I have plants.
Jerry, look at this closet. Look at this. I'm walking in it. It's a walk-in. Can you believe it? I'm nuts about this. What do you think?
I like that. What do you think, George?
It's your decision.
I'm taking it. I'm taking the place. I'm going to take it. This is going to be my new place. I'm living here. I'm moving.
You're moving? That means I'm moving. Oh! Gee! Is that incredible?
Congratulations.
So did you bring the lease? Yeah, okay. Gee, 3 years. That kind of seems like a long time.
Oh, Jerry. Listen, if you are feeling uncomfortable about this at all, do not feel like you have to take it.
Why?
If you're having second thoughts, if you didn't want it, don't worry about it because, you know, I could take it, you know.
You could take it. You want it?
No, I don't want it. I want it if you don't want it.
So you do want it?
No, I want it if you don't want it.
You just said you wanted it.
No, I'm saying if a situation arose in which you didn't want it, I might take it.
So take it.
How can I take it?
How can I take it?
It's your apartment.
How can I want it now if you want it?
Excuse me, I don't mean to cause any trouble here, but George, if you take it, can I take your place?
Yes, but I am not taking it.
I am not taking it.
Well, one of you better damn well take it.
Well, what do you want to do?
I don't know.
You want to flip a coin?
Who flips? You flip, I'll call.
Okay, fine.
All right.
This is the official flip. No crying, no guilt. Winner takes all, and that's it. Agreed?
I'm good.
I don't know who to root for. George's place has carpeting.
All right, now you call it in the air.
No catching.
No.
All right, flip it. Heads.
Tails.
No, it hit the table. It hit the table.
So what?
Interference! You can't count that! Come on, are you crazy? The coin cannot touch anything. It affects it.
You didn't call no interference.
You don't have to call that. That's a rule.
I don't believe this.
Oh, all right, fine. Jerry, you win. Take it. Just take it.
I don't want to win it like this, Elaine.
All right.
I didn't know there was a...
All right. I just want to play one final clip, and then I want to leave a little bit of time that we can sort of wrap up the whole series, and hopefully people will have some ideas about, you know, all the things we've talked about over the last few weeks. So Larry David, there's lots of Larry David that we could look at, obviously, in terms of his mansion and, you know, his whole lifestyle in Beverly Hills. But I thought this was kind of a good way of coming full circle. Larry David going back to see his where he grew up in Brooklyn.
Larry David grew up in the Sheep's Head Bay section of Brooklyn, New York. He lived in an apartment complex surrounded by his extended family.
So this was my apartment. This is where I grew up.
Okay.
And this is where my aunt, uncle, and cousins grew up. And here, and the Schwartzes lived here.
Right.
Buddy and Ethel and their girls. Upstairs, my grandmother and my uncle and my cousin. And friends on the second floor and the fourth floor.
So you grew up among...
Yeah, I was up and down these stairs all day.
Doors were always
yeah,
open. You could
yeah,
come in and out.
Yeah.
Galinsky.
See how the...
Oh, look at there.
Oh, wow. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Well, we had a piano over here. Yeah, right. This is done. Yeah, look. It looks even smaller than I remember it.
You must be Mrs. Galinsky. Hello.
Yeah.
I'm Charlie Rose. You must know
Yeah.
this man.
Hello. Hi. Hi. Nice to meet
So
you.
what was it like? You know, he lived here.
Yeah. Look at our kitchen. Look at the size of our kitchen.
You had your own room.
Yeah, this was my room right here. This is my room. I shared with my brother. Yeah, there were beds here and here. Yeah, this is my room. And
Now, Ken is older or younger?
he's older, yeah.
He's older. You shared a bedroom.
Yeah.
This one had to be...
This is the master bedroom.
This is
Yeah, yeah, that's my parents' room. And
This is the bathroom.
yeah, it's the bathroom. And this was, by the way, this was a 3-bedroom. So this was luxurious. Yeah.
This is like
This
house
is
size.
yeah. So this was a den. This was where the TV was. Yeah. And my father used to sit here on the chair and watch The Untouchables, and this was the couch, and yeah.
But you knew most of the people in this building.
Yeah, everybody, you knew everybody in the building.
They all knew you knew the kids, everybody knew what everybody's business was.
Absolutely. You knew, you could recite every apartment. You knew who lived in every single apartment in the building.
There before they did.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, no, we were the first ones in the building.
Right.
So, you know, for 10 years, there wasn't much turnover. And you knew who lived in every apartment.
And your grandmother would come down and...
Yeah, my grandmother upstairs. And,
Would you eat together?
well, yeah, we would, except for my father, because he came home too late. He came home too late from work to eat with him.
He made, he was a clothing manufacturer.
He was a salesman. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like this is a good thing. Family, everybody, you know?
Yeah.
Took care of each other.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I remember always trying to touch the ceiling to jump.
All right. Okay. All right. That's all I have for today. As I said, I want to leave a few minutes just for some questions or comments. Has anyone ever done that? Has anyone ever gone back to a place, you know, to their childhood home?
I have, but we didn't go in. It's totally changed because my grandmother and aunt lived across the street, and just what he's saying, we knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you're familiar with a book called, oh God, now I forgot the name of it. It's about the redlining of Dorchester.
Yeah, that's what I was
The death
thinking
of an American Jewish community. And it was amazing what they did to get the Jews out.
Yeah, it's by Hillel Levine and somebody else. And
what's the story? What happened?
Yeah, talk about that.
It's about the banks decided they wanted the property and to get the Jews out. So they spread all kinds of rumors and all kinds of lies. Did you hear about the little girl on Ewan Street that was raped by a black man? You know, all this garbage, and slowly everybody left.
Yeah.
And you know what happened? They sold those properties, the rents, to the African Americans. Many of them reneged, and the bank could do it again.
Yeah, and the bank made a profit on it.
Yeah, but I did want to comment more on topic. Was I grew up where Woody Allen's experience in radio days, especially, was like living in my own house with the extended family and all the, you know. That was more contemporary for me.
So I think the question that I always have is sort of what has been lost along the way. You know, I mean, there was something that I imagine was wonderful about, you know, having your family, your extended family,
right,
you know, all around you. There was probably less privacy. There was probably, you know, more of a sense that, you know, people's parenting choices could be challenged by their parents and other relatives and things like that. But nowadays we're kind of at the opposite extreme where, you know, so many people are so far away from their families. And, you know, my wife and I are always a little bit jealous of people who, you know, we lived in Harrisburg for many years and now in Baltimore. And we know so many people who have, you know, parents nearby. And it's just so much easier in terms of all the babysitting and whatever, and their children also have a much closer relationship with their grandparents because of that. And you know, but on the other hand, people have all kinds of reasons nowadays. I mean, mostly having to do with jobs and economic mobility to, you know, to be able to, you know, live wherever they want to live. So, I mean, what is it like for you? I mean, in terms of you know, how often do you get to see your grandchildren nowadays? Buddy?
It's definitely different.
Yeah, it's definitely different. And the other thing that strikes me is that in a Jewish context, I think one of the things that really helped to build Jewish identity in younger people was the fact that they had grandparents nearby, and aunts and uncles nearby. And, what does it mean for Jewish identity when you don't have that anymore? We've been talking the last 2 weeks about Jewish culture and how, nowadays, kids obviously don't really have a connection to that Eastern European Jewish culture or that Lower East Side Jewish culture or any of that we've been talking about for 3 weeks. And part of that is because, the past generations really aren't, a part of their lives. So everything for them is now, is, the culture of today. And, I don't know what that means in terms of the perpetuation of American Jewish culture. I don't think it's a good thing that there isn't that context anymore for it.
Do you think other ethnicities face the same thing? The Italians, the Irish who came here all lived together out of necessity, and now they're probably their children are everywhere.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is a similar thing. I know there are some ethnic groups. I know even among some Jewish, groups, for example, like Syrian Jewish immigrants, for example, where they expect their children to marry other Syrian Jews. They expect them to live nearby. They all go on vacation together to the Jersey Shore or whatever, where they have a summer house. They still maintain very, very tightly knit, families. There may be Asian immigrant subgroups that are like that as well. I don't know enough about that, whether, Korean Americans or whatever. I certainly know about, different neighborhoods that are, immigrant neighborhoods, Asian, Chinatowns and things like that. So it may be somewhat similar, but maybe that's just for the first couple of generations. Again, what happens after a few generations go by? Anita, did you have a thought about that?
Yes, that's the point I wanted to make. I think when we come to a new, strange country, and the culture of the country is very different from where we came from, we have the tendency to, and the language, because language is a big thing. Yeah. We have the tendency to live together. I lived in a neighborhood in New York where the adjoining neighborhood became 75% ethnically Asian, while I was living there for about 8 or 9 years. And I saw this thing that we experienced as Jews in the early part of the century. They move in together. The families move in close, and the neighborhood changes, and more, in this particular case, more and more Chinese families move in, and they establish Chinese schools and Chinese cultural clubs for the children. I remember going to Workman Circle School when I was young. That we didn't have clubs. We went as children. We went to Workman Circle School in the afternoon after school. And then as we moved out of that community and expanded into the culture of the United States, my parents no longer didn't drive on Shabbat, so we didn't have to live close enough to our grandparents to walk. I lived on Hopkinson and Newlatts when I was a child, and we were able I remember on Shabbat, we would walk to my grandmother's house on St. John's Place. It's a long walk, but guess what?
I'm just conscious of the time.
Okay, go
Thanks.
ahead.
So,
Ted, if you want to say any closing words.
No, I just want to say how much I've enjoyed being, being a part of this, and really looking forward. I'm hoping that you'll all come on Sunday, and I can meet you in person. And it's going to be, it'll be very different from the first session that we did on food. I won't say it's very different. I'll have mostly different clips. Let's put it that way. So it'll be really fun. I think you'll really enjoy it.
We
Drop it. Yeah, and I'll drop it in the chat one more time as well, so you can see. Enjoy. Thanks to Aileen. She'll be there Sunday as well, along with Julie Guzzi. And this event is for Temple members. So if you know anyone who isn't registered that would like to, please do so. And Ted, thank you so much. You've been wonderful to have speaking. Thanks to your wife who's on today as well. Welcome, Andrea. And just great to see everyone. We'll see you in person on Sunday.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thanks again.
Thanks,
everyone.
Aileen.
Have a great day.
All right, thank you.
Excited to meet everybody. Thank you.